I think Ukraine, Russia might be going okay, and you're going to be finding out pretty soon. There's a point at which you just have to either put up or shut up, and we'll see what happens.
Kyiv has warned that Russia is planning a fresh spring offensive to ramp up pressure and seize more of Ukraine. Alicia.
Stephanie Bennett, thank you. So, Joey, Zelensky also, in addition to the response that Stephanie reported, he also said talks have never stopped ballistic missiles and aerial bombs. What's needed is an attitude toward Russia that a terrorist deserves. And the president seems to be losing his patience here.
Yeah, I think President Trump's words, as brief as they were there, are probably about the most stern that we've heard as far as Russia goes. I think he very astutely knows that when you come in as a new face, you've got to take a different tone and tenor just to get someone's attention, whether it be Putin or Xi or whoever. But he's been in for almost 100 days, and we saw how it blew up with Zelensky. I don't think Trump favors Russia over Ukraine. I think Trump favors a deal over stubbornness. And so it seems to me like perhaps the opportunity to readdress things with Ukraine and maybe just losing his patience with Russia. I don't know where you go from here. I don't know how you force the issue other than economic sanctions. And I don't know that we have enough of those to keep Russia steady.
Yeah. And we heard, Lisa, Stephanie's reporting on this spring offensive that is planned, which analysts are saying, that could fall right into Russia's hands if they're trying to gain ground heading into more negotiations if they continue.
Yeah, and look, I think President Trump, what makes President Trump so great at foreign policy is he sees the world clearly. Like Joey said, he doesn't favor Putin or Russia, but he wants to strike a deal. And I think he realizes that Ukraine will likely have to give up some territory. And I think that's also the sticking point for Zelensky. Obviously, you don't want to have to cede part of your country or part of your ground, but they're not going to be able to expel Russia out of their country, especially not if, unless we have a full-throated boots on the ground from other countries involved. And President Trump also doesn't want this to be an endless amount of money going to Ukraine for a war that's unwinnable. And we've seen Zelensky act belligerently in trying to strike a deal, particularly a mineral deal. So, look, hopefully some sort of deal gets done because, otherwise we're just going to have continued killing until there's some sort of realization that some territory is going to need to be ceded.
Yeah, very good point. And while the Defense Department is trying to bring peace to the world, Secretary Pete Hegseth continues to root out DEI in our military. The U.S. Naval Academy has now purged hundreds of books from its library, including titles like Critical Race Theory and Education, A Marxist Response, Women with Mustaches and Men Without Beards, and How to Be Anti-Racist as part of Hegseth's anti-DEI initiative. But of course, Democrat Minority Leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, took issue with the DEI crackdown.
These DEI hires in the Trump administration, like Pete Hegseth, the so-called Secretary of Defense, dumb effing individuals, continue to try to test our resolve and cancel our history. We're going to keep the pressure on until this book ban is reversed and Pete Hegseth is fired.
And this morning, Secretary Hegseth responded.
They don't like the fact that we're ripping DEI out of the military and making it colorblind and merit-based. If their whole strategy is, I don't even know how long the video was, didn't see it, minute-long videos on TikTok to call us names while we secure the southern border, kick out Chinese influence, revive the warrior culture inside our military, that's why they lost in a historic fashion to President Trump.
So, Gianna, as you can see there, the secretary chose not to hit back with name-calling. He talked about the issues.
And you can see exactly why President Donald Trump chose him as defense secretary. I proudly supported Pete in his confirmation hearing in the Senate. And that's exactly what we need to be doing as a country. When you talk about folks that are going to be fighting on the ground for the United States of America, that should be their focus. You should be able to fight, actually. You need to be able to fulfill particular requirements. And talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I don't think is one of them when you're in a foxhole, and Joey can speak to this, trading fire back with another country, whoever your opposition are. You're not going to say, are you black, are you white, are you this, are you that? You want to make sure that people are focused on the fight ahead. And speaking to Ukraine and Russia, there needs to be a maximum pressure campaign on Russia, 1.8 million casualties on the Russia side, generally speaking, some reports have suggested. this cannot continue on. And I think that's one of the things that President Trump is frustrated by. He's a new voice, new leader, and not like Joe Biden, which what allowed this whole war to start to begin with.
Yeah, and Joey, in its most basic terms, it's about getting rid of anything that's actually distracting from the mission. Yeah,
if Pete Hegseth is a DEI hire, it's because he's an actual veteran. Is that the subclass he fits into, or he's a white male and maybe that's DEI now because we've been attacked for so long? I don't know. Listen, all I know is that Pete Hegseth came into the Secretary of Defense office with a plan and an absolute mission. I don't know what Lloyd Austin's mission was. I guess to skip out of work and not get caught doing it, or maybe to let 13 die in Afghanistan and not be held accountable for it. I don't know. Pete Hegseth had a defined mission. I want the warfighter to be represented and felt supported and allowed to go kill bad people. That's what the military is. It's not supposed to make you feel good, look good, think good, not supposed to make you feel like an individual who's seen. Right. You are a little toy soldier on a big board, and your life is worth as much as it takes until you lose it, and that's it. And you do that for freedom, and that's why you join the military. And if you want to know how it's resonating, I just visited Parris Island, South Carolina, and the African-American one-star general there, General Williamson, don't know his politics, could not be happier for the amount of people coming in and joining the Marine Corps right now.
Yeah.
Well,
and recruitment numbers are up. Yeah.
Exactly. We've seen record-breaking recruitment because, to Joey's point, we have an administration that is refocused on the military's core mission, lethality.
Yeah.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.